Hello, kindergartners. It is a pleasure for me, Mrs. Schmidt, to be your art teacher for the rest of the year. Now, some of you might recognize me and say, hey, there's my art teacher. And some of you might say, where's my art teacher? I'm Mrs. Stark for my art teacher, or I am Mr. McMillan. Well, us art teachers are going to kind of be working together. You see, Mr. McMillan and Mrs. Stark are going to be taking care of covering lessons for some of the other grade levels. So I'm going to be responsible for taking care of lessons for the kindergarten students. So you'll be seeing me probably on a weekly basis to present new lessons to you. So without further ado, we're going to talk about living and non-living things in art. My understanding is that in your studies this week, that you're talking about living and non-living things. And so we're going to look at different types of artwork and whether they contain living things or non-living things. So let's get started. We're going to look at portraits. Now, I bet you might have already made a self-portrait or a portrait this year. A portrait is a picture of somebody else that an artist creates. It may be a drawing or a photograph or a painting or something else. And a self-portrait is when an artist makes a picture of themselves. So let's take a look. We have some different artwork here, some different examples. So you can see there is a Vincent van Gogh self-portrait he made of himself. We have images from pop art that show Marilyn Monroe. She lived quite a long time ago, and they were created of her. Also, we see the most famous portrait or painting in the whole world, the Mona Lisa, created by Leonardo da Vinci. And lastly, we see another self-portrait by Frida Kahlo. And the question is, are these subjects of these artworks living things or non-living things? Let's see. Think in your mind. Are people living things or non-living? If you said people are living things, you are right. Great job. Let's go on. Landscapes. Landscapes are artworks. They're about like an outdoor scene. Usually it has land and maybe trees and plants, maybe some buildings, maybe some mountains, maybe even some water. Now, if we look at this landscape over here that shows all the trees, are trees living things or non-living things? Think in your mind. Here, let's go up and look at this landscape that's called Starry Night. And it has like a swirling sky, bright stars, and a moon. We see some trees kind of closer to us. And far off, we see a little village down below, and maybe some mountains. What things in that artwork are living? What things are non-living? Probably the trees are living, but would buildings be living? No, those are man-made things. Or the mountains? Nope, they're not living either. Next, let's take a look at this artwork at the bottom that's brightly colored. We see a little house by the water and lots of flowers. Oh, it's so rich with color. So the flowers, are those living things or non-living things? Think about it in your mind. How about the water? Is water living or non-living? Or the house, living or non-living? I want you to kind of think about your answers in your mind. Landscapes often have living and non-living things in them. Plants of all sorts are living things. So we saw trees and we saw flowers and bushes, and those were living things. But mountains and houses are non-living things. Let's take a look at still life paintings. Still life paintings are usually about smaller objects. For instance, we might see some fruit or some flowers. We might see some bread or a wine bottle. A lot of times there's kind of food involved, but not always. So you can see some different images of still lifes. Now, if we take a look at the one with the flowers, this is called sunflowers. And if you think about the vase or the table, are those living things or non-living? Think about it in your mind. How about the flowers? That one's a little tricky. Those flowers are no longer on the stem, like in the ground growing, but are they still living? I actually had to look this up. And so flowers that have been cut and put in water in a vase and are still blooming and look fresh, those are living things. Now, if we were to allow those flowers to dry out and die, they would become non-living things. Next, if we look at the peaches that are all wrapped up in plastic wrap like they were in the store, is fruit a living thing or a non-living thing? I actually had to look this one up too. It's kind of a tricky one. If the fruit is on the tree, it is actually, or on the bush, it is actually living because it's growing and getting kind of nourishment from the plant. But once it's plucked off the tree or the bush, it becomes non-living. And then let's look at the artwork down here in the bottom. Is that have things that are living or non-living? Remember we talked about fruit. Once it's picked, it is non-living. Think about the bottle, or it looks like maybe some bread on a plate or a cloth. Are those things living or non-living? Let's see. Still life paintings contain both living and non-living things. Fruit off the plate, fruit off the plant, vases, bottles, and cloth are all non-living things. Flowers, when they are still fresh in the soil or water, are considered living things. Let's take a look at animals in artwork. Let's see, I'll move myself down here so that I'm not blocking our artwork here. All right. Artwork about animals. Some of you, if you've had me as an art teacher, you might recognize the rhino here. Look at how detailed. It's got all sorts of texture and pattern on it. So that is a very interesting artwork, and it's very different than the other artwork that you see here. We see beautiful colors with the polar bears and this blue horse. You might be attracted to those bright colors. And over here in this corner with the brown horse with the black outline, did you know that artwork is so old? In fact, it was one of the first artworks ever. That is a cave painting. Early men and women would often draw pictures about animals and hunts on the caves and cave walls. It's so amazing. And it looks like it's running. Look at the movement that is created in that artwork. Now, are animals living things or non-living things? What do you think? I bet you said that animals are living things. Well, guess what? We're going to draw a living thing as well. We're going to draw a chameleon. A chameleon is a type of reptile, and you might know it because it's got these little hands that are very grippy, and they grip on really well to branches, and they also have a long curly tail, and they have a tongue that likes to come out and catch bugs. And they're also known for their eyes that can move all over the place. They can see in all directions. All right, so I'm going to walk you through about how to draw a chameleon. To be honest, you could draw a chameleon any way you want, but I just thought I'd show you how we can use simple shapes to draw something that's more complex. Artists often do that. They start with simple shapes. So here you can see an example of kind of some of the steps that we might take to draw this chameleon. You can always refer back to this if you want to. I'm going to also draw it for you so you can kind of see it happen in action. All right. Now, the things that you will need is you'll need a piece of paper, you'll need a pencil, and probably some markers, crayons, or colored pencils, whatever you have available. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get out our paper, and I'm going to use a marker so that you can see when I draw. If I used a pencil, it would be very, very light and you probably wouldn't see it. But I would recommend you use pencil in case you make a mistake, you can erase. And then you can always trace with a black marker or crayons or colored pencils if you need to. All right, let's get started making our living chameleon. All right, let's start at the center of our paper. I'm going to create what looks kind of like a corner, but we're going to go from one top of that corner and make a curve down to that other edge. Next, I'm going to extend our line going this way, and I'm going to make a slightly smaller curve going that way. This is going to be kind of the head of our chameleon. And here is the body. Next, I'm going to add some little legs onto our chameleon. Now, chameleons have really cool grippy legs. These ones are a little bit more simplistic. Remember, we're using simple shapes to draw something that's more complex. Next, we're going to give our chameleon a really cool kind of curly tail. So I made a curly line, and then I'm going to kind of close it off and give it some thickness by following that curve all the way back to the body. There we go. He's got his nice long tail. Next, let's add that really cool big eye that can kind of look everywhere. So we're going to use a good sized circle on his head, and then you can have him looking wherever you want. I'm going to have him looking up this way, but you could have his eye over here. Their eyes can go all over the place. It's so cool. Next, we're going to give him a curly tongue. So here comes that curly tongue. That tongue's going to be good for catching bugs. I'm going to add a little bit more black there and a little bit more black here. My marker started running out at those spots. All right, notice we have a nice repetition. We got the nice repetition of the curve of the tail, and also that's repeated with the curve of his tongue. All right, now we're going to put a pattern on him. We're going to put some stripes. A pattern is something that repeats, and we often talk about patterns in art, but I bet you've also talked about patterns in your classroom with your classroom teacher. Sometimes you talk about A-B patterns like ABC, and it repeats ABC, ABC. You might have patterns with numbers or shapes. Well, we're going to have a pattern of stripes on our chameleon. Next, let's add the branch that he's on. So he's not just floating in the air. So we're going to pretend our tree is over here, kind of off the page. And so I'm going to draw a horizontal line. I'm going to write underneath our chameleon. And then at the end, I'm going to kind of make it look like the branch is dividing here at the end, because this is the branch he's sitting on. And I'm also going to create it thicker over here where it's closer to the trunk of the tree. All right, so here he is gripping on to our branch. There we go. Now we're going to make this look even more like a branch by adding on maybe another little branch starting to grow there. And we'll put some leaves. So I'm going to create like a curve and then another curve that kind of matches up. And then we'll put a line down the center, which kind of represents the vein of the leaf. And here's another one. And curve, curve, and then a line down the center like that. And I'm thinking that maybe we'll put another leaf kind of over here. It's kind of coming off from the edge of the paper. And maybe I'll put one over here too. All right, that's obviously a tree now. So let's see. Chameleon is a reptile. And did you know reptiles often like to warm themselves? Sometimes they, if you have one as a pet, you might put a heat lamp in. Or if they're outside in the and have a chance to sit in the sun, they like to sit in the sun. So I'm going to create a sun. Now, I liked kind of the repetition of our curly tongue, curly tail, and I'm going to put a swirl for our sun as well. And you can make your drawing however you want. This is just a good starting point to kind of help you learn how we can use simple shapes to draw things that are more complex. You'll notice that the rays of my sun are triangles. Let's see. Here we go, all the way around. But you can draw your sun however you want. That's the great thing about being an artist, is there's no one right way. And to be honest, I hope that when you do your drawing of your chameleon, that you do some things differently, that you get creative and add other details in. Maybe you don't want to put stripes on your chameleon. Maybe you want to put polka dots or checkers, like a checkerboard. All right, so there's our chameleon on a beautiful sunny day. You know what? I might put a cloud overhead as well, but it's going to be a white puffy cloud. And I think our chameleon might get hungry sometimes. And so I'm actually going to put an insect, maybe a fly, kind of flying by. So he's going to be kind of up here. I'm going to make him like an oval, very simple. I'll put some wings on him. Maybe I'll have like the little vein of the wings. And, flies tend to have big eyes. So I'm going to put some big eyes. And they're kind of checkerboard. So I'm going to kind of do some what we call cross hatching. It kind of looks like lines going one way and then lines going another way. And he's just out minding his own business. I'm going to put some legs on him. They're kind of flying back as he moves forward. And insects have 6 legs. So we put 6 legs on our little fly there. He's like moving. I got some little lines to show the wings that are moving. And I'm going to create a little flight path for him. Kind of did a swirl, and there he goes, flying along. He doesn't know what's coming, but that chameleon might get hungry for a snack. And because he's a living thing, he eats, right? So there we have our drawing of the chameleon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to follow this, that would be great. Have fun with it. Use simple shapes to draw something more complex. Or if you want to look at pictures of a real chameleon and draw what you see, I encourage that too. Feel free to draw other things as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am so glad to have shared this with you, and I hope you have a great week creating art. Stay well. Bye.